The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Depending on what time zone you're in, good morning or good afternoon. This is Reproaction Presents and the fourth and final session of our direct action training series. And this one's titled Actions Over. Now what? So I want to thank everyone for joining, for making time today. Just want to remind you that if you have questions throughout, you can ask them when you have them. You don't have to wait until the end, but we will have time for Q&A at the end if you have questions. And you don't have to force questions. If you have them, ask them. If you don't worry about it. We won't take it as a symbol that you're not paying attention or that you didn't get anything out of this. So we'll go ahead and get started. We have a lot to get through today. So want to respect people's time and make sure that y'all are out of here by 12 p.m. So let's get going. The voice you're hearing right now is me, Ivania Woods. I'm the Movement Building and Research Manager at Reproaction. I have been working for Reproaction a little over 5 years now, and oh, wait a minute. There you go. Thank you, Caitlin. So that means that you didn't get to see the first slide. Boo! Gotta go back just so you know. Isn't it beautiful? Okay, going back. So the voice you're hearing is me, Vania Woods, and the Movement Building and Research Manager at Reproaction. I've spent the last 5 years working for Reproaction, reproductive justice work. The 5 years prior to that, doing economic justice and racial justice organizing in Missouri. I still am in Missouri. But Reproaction is a national org working to increase access to abortion and advance reproductive justice. So I've worked on multiple things, including increasing birth control and abortion access, addressing racial health disparities, and ending HIV criminalization. And our other co-presenter today is Caitlin Blunny, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Thanks so much, Eva. My name is Caitlin Blunny. I use she, her pronouns. I have also been with Reproaction for about 5 years now. Here at Reproaction, I am the outreach and culture manager. So I work a little bit doing organizing, and I also help manage our self-managed abortion campaign. Outside of my work at Reproaction, I am also a social justice oriented artist. You might know my work online. I use the handle Liberal Jane. And I'm really excited to be here with y'all this evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you're joining us from, and really excited to dig in.
Fantastic. So today's objectives, we're going to review a few things. We're going to talk about debriefing with participants, the notice, providing notices of next actions and events, how participants can help build the movement, and writing about your actions that you have. Something to keep in mind as we go throughout the day or this training is that the work of organizing a successful action doesn't end when the event ends. There's been so many times where I've been a part of actions where there was no follow-up. There was nothing that came after. It's like, thanks for coming. Okay, bye. But we're trying to build a bigger, better, more powerful movement. And as a part of that, this portion of post the action is also as important as the planning that goes into the action or event. So hopefully y'all are taking notes and tune in and walk away from this training with something useful that you can use when you're on the ground doing this work.
Yes, thank you so much, Eva, for that. So as Eva mentioned, debriefing after an action and really thinking about what just happened, what next steps are, is just as important as planning the action itself. So of course, with the debrief, there's some goals that you want to keep in mind. Of course, this is an opportunity to review what worked, what didn't work. And there are different things that we can evaluate so we can continue to improve. But in addition to that, reflecting and looking back at what you did, the action that you took, the work that you did, is really at the core of making sure that people feel like their activism is effective. I know many of us have probably over the years have gone to a big rally and there's lots of momentum, there's lots of energy, and then after the action, nothing happens. There's no follow-up. And that can be really deflating, and it can really make you wonder, was it worth me going? Was it worth me putting in the time and energy? And of course it was. But as leaders in this movement, it's really important for us to acknowledge and make people feel like their activism is worthwhile. So as we're debriefing, some things to keep in mind. We want to think about who were we able to engage, who co-sponsored, co-organized, who was involved. In addition to who was involved and acknowledging that, it's also a time for us to think about who wasn't involved, who wasn't able to show up, and how can we make the event more accessible next time. So for example, perhaps your action was in the evening, which might not work for people who are parenting. So thinking in the future, if that community is important to have as a part of your action, thinking about what you can do next time to make it more accessible. The next thing that we want to think about is the what. So what went well and what didn't. Letting people name themselves and really bringing people together into a group setting, I think, is really important for this, because us as organizers, we have sort of a bird's eye view of what's happening at an event at all times. We're aware of what people are doing, how people are interacting, but it's also really important for us to understand the participants' point of view. How are they feeling? What did they see? What do they think should have happened? And that is helpful feedback not only for us, but also makes the person that you're speaking with, the person who took action with you, feel like their input, their observations are valuable. And again, that goes back to what we were talking about with effective activism. And then in addition, of course, making time for this, really being intentional with this debrief, and making sure that you are scheduling time after an action for people to decompress and come together perhaps a couple days later, a week later. And if it really is impossible for you to meet in person, I think that's always the ideal, so we can be in community with each other, to be interacting with each other. If it's not able to be in person, there's also virtual spaces where debriefing can happen, Zoom calls, even Google Jam boards are a good place. But at the bare minimum, even a survey can really help make sure that we are getting everything we need to know from participants before moving on to the next action. Because if we just keep doing and doing and doing, we're bound to make mistakes, and we're not necessarily creating actions that are inclusive or really rooted in the needs of our communities.
Okay, before you proceed, we have a question. Does keeping in mind who didn't attend relate to organizations or groups who refuse to support the action, to kind of put the spotlight on them, or keep an eye on their actions, realizing how silent they are? Or is that too hostile / negative?
That's a great question. I think it really depends on the action, and Eva, I'd invite your input on this too. It really depends on the action and the goals of that action. If there's a constituency that you're like, they should be here, they should have a say, and there's opposition to it, I think it is worthwhile building those relationships and trying to open up dialogue. However, if we're talking about opposition, or we're talking about anti-abortion activists, I don't think that's as productive to sort of worry about how they're going to react. Of course, we want to think through those things, but I don't necessarily think, changing plans to fit opposition's expectations is a good thought process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. I think the question was just more so on more like why speak to who isn't present. Um, but I think you did a good job. And you answered it more robustly than I think it was necessarily asked. So I have nothing to add. And they said thank you.
We aim to over deliver.
So no, that's good. That's good. All right.
Okay, and then, as we continue, we've brought people together. What are we going to do? So we want to think about why we're doing this, and not only for ourselves, why are we debriefing, but articulating that to participants and really helping them understand that, like, we are, listening as we go and we're changing as we need to. It also helps strengthen expectations, to hold each other accountable, and improve future action planning. If you had an action that perhaps didn't go as planned, you don't want to just leave people hanging, even if you might feel embarrassed or you might have your own emotions. It's really important that we're in conversation with people, that we're articulating our successes, our failures, that we are naming how to improve, because that's how we grow into stronger movements. No movement relies on just one person, and especially as organizers, it's important for us to continue to have these conversations in community and with the people that we're taking action with. And then, of course, when you're doing debriefing, it's important to determine the how. It's not good just to say, we're going to debrief at 1 and then not have necessarily a plan. So thinking through, if it's in person, are we going to have poster paper for people to write down suggestions? Are we going to have a brainstorming moment? Are we going to have guided questions and then allot 5 minutes each? Any of those things might work, but all of that should be determined in advance. And ideally, you have one person posing questions and someone note-taking. And other circumstances, such as Google Jamboards, it might be that everyone can contribute and there's a certain level of anonymity. It really depends on your group, the size of the group, who's in that group, the trust that's there. And when I mention trust, I also want to highlight that this debriefing meeting and this exercise is a part of that trust building, being able to be honest and transparent with people about, again, the successes and the failures. And so one tool that can be really helpful for reflecting, and this is something that I like to do in my activism, that when I plan an action or event, at the beginning of the event, at the end of the event, articulating the POP. So POP is purpose, outcome, and process. And so even though this is typically determined and planned before an action, it serves purpose beyond that. It's something that I like to articulate to activists, like I said, at the beginning, at the end of an action, as a tool for evaluation, but it can also be really important in the debriefing space. So first, starting with purpose. Why did we do this? What was the purpose? Perhaps it was an action outside a crisis pregnancy center. The purpose of it was to bring awareness to the fact that this fake clinic is in this neighborhood. We were letting neighbors be aware. That might have been the purpose. The outcome, what were the specific outcomes that we wanted to accomplish? In this example, it might be widespread awareness. Thinking about how do we measure that? Is that conversations with neighbors? Is it honks of support? How you measure it is really up to you, but again, thinking through how you're going to measure it. And then the process. So what did we do to achieve these outcomes? And what could be changed next time? So perhaps in this instance, again, going back to this crisis pregnancy center example, perhaps we flyered, perhaps we held up posters, perhaps we called local news. Being able to name and articulate what your POP is really helps activists understand why and how they took action the way they did, and also helps them understand what the larger goal is. If the goal is really to bring awareness to the harm that crisis pregnancy centers pose in our communities, there are many ways that we can do that. And working under that umbrella goal allows people to think and have more creativity with the process and how they take action. And I think that can create room for a lot of creativity, new ideas, new ways to engage in activism, which especially in this moment of uncertainty, there's so much distrust in our communities right now. There's so much fear, especially for those who are living in states where abortion is now heavily restricted or banned. And thinking through these things, thinking through the way people react, thinking through our methods, all is in the goal of improving and growing our movement. And so how do we create this positive space? We're debriefing with everybody. How do we make a space where people can trust each other? Because all of us have probably been in activist space where we feel like it doesn't matter if I'm here or not. My opinion doesn't matter. We don't want people to feel that way when they're debriefing with us, and we don't want them to feel that way when they're taking action. So ahead of the debriefing session, it's great to have a few guiding questions to keep the conversation moving. So for example, in this example I keep using with the Crisis Pregnancy Center, an important question for that might be, how did people in the community react? And just letting people in your group generate ideas. Oh, I saw someone honk at me. Oh, I saw somebody yell at me. Getting those responses and letting people know that their experiences and what they saw during the action was important to capture and important to keep in mind. We also want to make sure, again, that we're identifying people to serve as facilitators or note takers. That can be the same person, but I do think it's an opportunity for us to share roles and responsibility. And especially in this moment in our movement, there are so many people who want to get involved, so many people that are new to the movement, and assigning roles can be a meaningful way to help share some of that power and shift the traditional leadership pipeline that we have. The people leading the movement don't necessarily have to be people working in nonprofits or traditional groups. And how are we making space for them? And then, of course, as I mentioned before, using a collaborative space for discussion. If your participants need anonymity and they want to be anonymous, that's good. If you want to do surveys beforehand or send guiding questions in advance so people can sort of ruminate on them, all of that stuff is good. It just takes some planning and some intention. And I'll turn it back over to Eva.
Great. So yeah, I emphasized this in the last session. I'm going to continue to emphasize it here, that you want to make sure that you have a way to inform people about your next actions or events. When you have people show up to your actions, they're showing you that they are willing to show up for the work that you are doing, right? So you want to keep your base or your supporters involved. And a question that always comes up is, what's next? When's the next thing? We all know how invigorating, how galvanizing being in movement together can be when you're looking around and people who are thinking like you, feeling like you, just as angry and upset as you, or just as set on addressing issues and problems. It's empowering, right? And you want to keep that energy going. So it's super important that you have a way to channel their energy moving forward. And so something that we talked about in the second session on recruitment and mobilization, which I'll get to a little bit here in a second, but just go back and review that. If you missed that one, go back and watch the video. If you didn't miss it, but maybe your notes weren't as good as you want to revisit it, please do that. A lot of information there regarding like how to get people to continue to be mobilized around the work. So if it's an action or event that you had where there were sign-up sheets, you want to have a system in place for how to follow up with people. Don't just have people signing up just so you can say how many people attended. You want people to sign up so that you can see who you can contact afterwards. So when you're creating that sign-up sheet, they'll have name, email, depending on what you want to use that information for, maybe their address or maybe just their zip code. Like you have to evaluate that, but you want to especially have a column for follow up or contact. Like, would they mind being contacted, or would they mind you following up, or do they want to continue to follow the work or something like that? Then you can follow up with them and tend to those uh, ways that we discussed about discussing with them what their talents are and how they could like engage with the work in a way that's best fitting with their capacity, right? So if they don't like being around a lot of people, they want to sit at home, work from home and do work and contribute, then maybe data input is important, right? Depending on what you're working on, what your group organization is working on, or maybe they work to like set up meetings, or they're keeping track of like how many people are being recruited in. Like there's data input could mean a variety of things. So that's just some suggestions there. If they're interested in, you see something in them where they seem like they would be really good leaders, um, figure out like how you could get them into like leadership training or positions, and in that way, right? So thinking about that, those one-on-ones are going to be super important, right? So when you're following up, you can be scheduling one-on-ones with people and doing that relationship building to discuss their capacity and their talents. And also, you want to be considering the group that you're with or the organization that you're with and the needs that the group or org has. So what do y'all need? What are you looking for? So it's not just about what they can contribute, it's also about what the group and organization needs are, um, and seeing if you can match those. But also, you might get something that you hadn't considered or thought about out of someone, right? They may be good with social media. They may be really good at writing. So maybe you put them there. Like, you want to be thinking about not just getting more people, but what are those people going to be doing? And you find that out by actually having conversations with them. Um, and last but not least is figuring out how to get them trained, right? Train. Not enough trainings. So you can partner them with leaders who can show them the ropes. Like if there's someone who it's like, I would love to learn how to plan actions, how to lead actions. Now there's steps. You just don't be like, okay, plan one. We have to learn about the history of movements. We have to learn about more about what works, what doesn't work, what's been done, and the importance of being innovative and creative in our processes of addressing these systems of oppression. And yeah, in so much as that, like, give them future opportunities to learn more about movement work. It can be trainings within the org or the group. What do you know? What knowledges do you possess that other leaders in your group and org possess? So in that movement building aspect, it doesn't necessarily have to be about new people, but also in the people who are already there, right? What can they be learning? What information are they bringing with them? And what information can y'all share back with them and with each other, right? So some of that peer, it doesn't have to be some outside source training, then it can be peer trainings. So be thinking about that, because we have to build a sustainable movement. And I'm pretty sure most people attending this can attest to the fact that the people who do the work are the ones who are overloaded and overworked. And this work doesn't necessarily pay. It doesn't pay at all for some people, or it doesn't pay very much for most of us, the vast majority of us. Especially considering how emotionally draining it is and how urgent a lot of these things are. But think about like how you can get people in, how you can follow up with them, and figure out what their talents are and how you can help them maximize their talents. as we build a sustainable movement. All right. So that's what I have for you.
Thank you, Eva. So after we've debriefed with participants, it's also important for us to think about who are the people who weren't able to attend? Who are the people that perhaps don't know about us yet? Maybe the people who want to take action but aren't able to yet, or aren't sure what to expect. It's really important that we are able to document and share out what we did. And so a few things to keep in mind. The first is a press release. So typically before an action, you may choose to do an event advisory, which for folks who don't know what that is, essentially it's just explaining what you're doing, why you're doing it, and where you're going to be. It's the invitation for press to attend. After the event, however, you can send out a press release explaining exactly what you did and what happened. Part of the reason why debriefing is so important is that's a good opportunity for us to get quotes to put into either a press release or a blog or other online products. And it's important for us to really think about the narrative that we're telling through these actions. So with the press release, you can send that off to local press or even national press, depending on what the action is. Another good opportunity to sort of share back what we learned and talk about the work that we're doing is blogging about it. There's actually an example of that on the next slide, so I'm going to hold off on getting too deep into that. But the other thing is also social media. So it's great if you are taking action over and over again on the same issue. So let's say you are going back to my crisis pregnancy center example from earlier. Perhaps that's something you're doing over and over and over again. Having a hashtag so people can quickly click on that and see all the actions that you're doing, seeing the conversation that's happening around it, can help make that action more accessible. In addition, it's important for us to also think about how are we creating multiple ways for people to engage with the work. People aren't less valuable just because they can't show up and stand and take action with us. Instead, we want to make room for people to engage with us online, through social media, through other outlets. And always keeping that in mind, having a hashtag where people can tweet support or post in support of the action can go a long way. And eventually, who knows, that person might inspire other people in their life to take action, or perhaps will have the capacity to do so themselves. So if we could go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, social media actions, this one is before the pandemic, of course, but this is an example of a tweet from a crisis pregnancy center action where we're able to put forward our values, explain to people exactly why we're there. So in this case, we're tired of fake anti-abortion clinics shaming people in DC. We are specific about where the action is, about why we're there. So the statement, we are pro-abortion, pro-family, pro-justice, and articulating that what we're doing is community education. So if somebody was to see this tweet, they would know exactly what taking action looks like. It would look like holding signs outside a crisis pregnancy center and having conversations with neighbors. Another great way to share about what you're doing, in this example, it comes from Eva, is blogging about it. So in this situation, we see that Eva, after an action, wrote a blog where she clearly explains in specific terms what happened. So we know on May 30th, 28 activists showed up for a visibility action. We know exactly why they're there, to call out hypocrisy within the anti-abortion movement. We know where exactly it happened and the reasons why. So then she starts getting into how they're funded and the education, and really laying out why they took action, how they took action, and has details about how people, if they're reading that, can continue to do so. So just something to keep in mind, you know, as you're wrapping up your actions. Of course, tweeting and documenting as you go is really important, but I think sometimes we have a tendency to say, okay, action's over, we're done now, but the work truly does not end there and should not end there. And it's really important for us within the movement, as well as the broader movement, to be documenting and sharing the lessons that we learned from taking action.
Yep, so that is all we have for you today. Unless y'all have questions, of course, type them up in the box and we'll get to them. Per usual, you want to follow us on our social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Our handle is at Reproaction. You can email us at reproaction@reproaction.org. And you can also visit our website. Our website is where you can find out all sorts of information about our campaigns. You can get on our email list, which you won't miss anything that we're doing if you get on that. And you'll learn about other things that other orgs in the movement are doing that are super important that we want to draw your attention to. You can read our blog, right? Read about what we're doing. But our campaigns, so much information on our website there, as we are a virtual organization and an education fund. So our objective is always to educate. And that's that. So if y'all have any questions, type them up. Want to express my appreciation for showing up, for those who have showed up for all of the sessions. Really, really appreciate you. Hopefully you've enjoyed the training. If anyone has any questions, or like you're wondering, well, how do I go see the other sessions? You can go to our website. On our resource page, the same way that you signed up. If you go to Facebook, if you signed up through Facebook and it took you to our website, which it did for you to sign up, the only way to do that was through our website. Go back to that page. This recording will be there. It will not be there because I failed to record. I'm just realizing, yikes. So this won't be recorded, but I will see about posting the slides. I can do that. Definitely forgot to hit record, but the slides will be there. And it'll all be on the same page, so no worries there. Yeah. All right, so let's get into, we got a couple questions. So how much time, I'm guessing after the direct action and follow-up should be incorporated in the feedback process? If you want to clarify that question a little bit, we'll come back to that one. Another question is, do we work directly with any campaigns, voting pushes, etc.? So yeah, of course. We're a campaign-driven organization. We have several campaigns, but some are receiving more attention now. And those are, per the examples that Caitlin was bringing up, the anti-fake clinic campaign, where we want to draw attention to these anti-abortion fake clinics. They like to pop up around actual healthcare, reproductive healthcare clinics, and their ultimate goal is to deter people from having abortions, but they're extremely harmful and dangerous in the peripheral, or the way that they are in process and working and how they function, because in at least 10 states, they receive public funding. So our tax dollars pay for them, and super problematic in that way. They deter people from getting like actual health care by making you think you're going into a real clinic where there are licensed physicians. They walk around in lab coats. It's a really odd thing to witness, and they tend to be religion based, which wouldn't be a problem per se if it wasn't so Christian focused, where it's really Christian focused in some ways that all Christians don't necessarily agree with. Other campaigns are drawing attention around this notion that there's a such thing as abortion pill reversal, which there is not. And Caitlin, you want to speak about what you're working on?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I help manage our self-managed abortion campaign, which is working to normalize and demystify abortion pills, which for folks who don't know, abortion pills can be used up to 12 weeks in pregnancy. There's also a protocol for abortion pills 12 to 24 weeks. You can find both protocols on our website. That is an education sharing campaign to eventually make abortion pills more accessible. And then in addition to that, a campaign that is very closely tied to that campaign is our Stop Prosecuting Abortion campaign, which is drawing attention to the criminalization of pregnancy outcomes, and specifically people who have been arrested or questioned, interrogated related to self-managed abortion or the accusal of self-managed abortion. That's some of the other work that we do. And in addition to just general organizing education and reproductive justice education.
Nice. It can say it's being recorded. It's not. I assure you. So going back to the first question. So the clarification on that was like, when should people follow up with participants after a direct action? Right away, after several days, etc.
Ooh, that's a good question. You know, I think it really depends on the organizer and their style. I wouldn't let too much time pass. I would let it, be fresh. So no more than a couple days. I think even doing a quick like huddle at the end of an action and just say, okay, here's what happened, here's what we're going to do, and promising that debrief space, whatever it might be, is an important first step as well. So a couple days after, if you're going to do an in-person meetup, I think up to a week or so after is totally fine. If it's going to be virtual, a week too. But if you're going to do anything like sending out a survey, let's say you're really strapped for time, that you want that feedback and that's the only way you can do it, I wouldn't wait more than a couple days.
Yep, I agree. You want to get people while they're galvanized, like while their energy's high, while they remember how great their action was. And the best time is like not to let too much time pass. Yeah. So abortion access front is also works on exposing fake clinics. They do. We are actually under the same umbrella of so we are very closely associated with them as far as like how would you word this, Caitlin? Neo is what? Like, I know it's a philanthropy group. Like, we're basically under that umbrella. So you might call them like a sister org.
Yeah, I would call them like a sister org. I think Abortion Access Front similarly brings a lot of creativity to fake clinic work, and like the way that we both work on the issue, I think are very similar and often sometimes collaborative, but often complementary. In particular, I want to uplift the work that they've done around action resources. So if you're looking for posters or messaging for specifically fake clinic actions, they're a great resource. In addition, I also wanted to point out that Reproaction has a fake clinic database, which for those who don't know, you can put in your zip code or your city and see exactly where the fake clinics in your neighborhood are, just to be aware and to, of course, spread the word to people as well.
I want to second that. Fake clinic database can be found. The fake clinic database can be found on our website. And it's a really good resource, a really good tool to have because, for instance, like here in Columbia, we have one clinic, and it is directly across the street from our Planned Parenthood that is here in Columbia. And the sign out front is My Life Clinic. And if you're unaware and you see a sign that says clinic on it, like, you just automatically think they're providing health care. It's a place that you can go. And with it being called My Life Clinic, then you think, oh yeah, they're going to have some resources for me as a pregnant person, or for people I know as a pregnant person. But oftentimes those resources are contingent upon you fulfilling things like religion-based counseling, where this isn't a psychologist you're talking to, it's someone who went to a seminar for 8 hours and now they deem themselves qualified to provide therapy for you. Or in order to get diapers, in order to get clothes and things like that, you have to attend Bible study sessions, things like that. Yeah, it's really wild stuff. They do all kinds of things that are problematic, like make people think they're further along in their pregnancies than they are, so that if the state that you're in, well, now they're pretty much abortion bans, but historically, whatever weeks the state that you're in stops doing abortions legally, they'll just tell you you're like a week or two past that, so that you don't seek that out as an option. Super problematic. So yeah, are there any more questions specifically about what to do after your action's over? We got a lot of questions coming in about big clinics. I'm glad y'all are interested. All right, there's one. Are we using, or should people be using, encrypted, safe contact methods to be cautious about whatever may have to happen in terms of government control? And I'm guessing this is related to what exactly, for the person who asked that? In relation to you as an organizer reaching out to people who've attended your events, or in relation to something else? So if we're in a hostile state, okay, reproaction specifically. No. So we're not a volunteer-based organization or a membership-based organization. We're an education fund, but this training, we do organizing work, right? And so when we are recruiting people and mobilizing people, it's around specific things we're doing. It's educating people so that they can go out and educate more people about things specifically. So a lot of that information, if you want to be thinking about how to reach out to people, how to speak to them, I'm thinking that it would more so be for folks who are on the ground, doing that work exclusively and specifically on the groundwork. So before the pandemic, before the COVID-19 pandemic, when I was the organizer in Missouri organizer, and Caitlin was organizing out in the DC DMV area, I was like, what's those letters? It is DMV, right? DC, Maryland, Virginia. Yeah, so back when we were organizing, I could speak to that. So it wasn't like I'm recruiting people. I was recruiting people for action specifically. So people that I wanted to do things in particular and for short term and relationship building on a grander scale, so that I could partner with people in the community for actions or events. Because again, we're education focused. But if your organization is like, you're raising awareness, you want people to participate in things, and you're particularly on working on the local level, state level, even at the national level, like thinking about what your organization and what your group needs. Again, I want to iterate that. So if you need to be reaching out to people and keeping information private and making sure that you're making it as hard as possible for people to get it, than texting. There's things that you can do. I would forward you to what's the org? It's digital. Oh, it's escaping me, Caitlin. What are
Digital Defense Fund.
it's fun? Yes. Their website, they have so much information and resources for you. But just off the top of my head, if you're texting, use Signal. It's an app that you can text from where it's encrypted. You can use search engines on your computer that are encrypted, like DuckDuckGo, I think it's called DuckDuckGo.
Mm.
And things like that. I know people think that if they're using Google when they go in incognito mode, that works. That is not encrypted. That is not the same. They're still tracking you, babes. So that is not what you want to do. That's more so on your end for other people in your home or who could be sharing your device that you don't want to see. That's not about other people outside of your laptop not seeing it. Any other suggestions, Kaylin?
If you're dealing with a large volunteer base, and especially if you're working in Repro right now, there's a lot of people who want to take action. I think it's okay to put together a volunteer vetting form. We've done this in the past with Google Forms where we ask people to have organizational affiliation. So maybe they volunteer as a clinic escort, whatever, or perhaps they know somebody and can use that as a reference. And just letting people know that they're going to be vetted, I've noticed helps keep opposition out because then they know that you're going to look into the name and Google it. Of course, that takes more capacity and time to have to individually vet people. And then, of course, some people, perhaps due to their age or just preference, don't have online presences. So if that is something that is of concern, you might want to factor in extra time before an action to have one-on-one calls with people to not only vet them, but as Eva was talking about before with roles, see what their skills are, what their interests are. All of that's really productive. The only downside, of course, is that takes a lot of time. And as organizers, that's typically a pretty limited resource for us.
Okay, and so ultimately they're saying that their question was about whether contacting people via email is secure or not. And they're worried about that because, as we know, state legislatures are trying to find ways to, or at least they're projecting the belief that they're trying to find ways, because passing a law and actually having the ability to enforce it, or people who are willing to enforce it, are two different things, three different things really. But here they're wanting to know about contacting people via email. And I would just say that in no situation should you be detailing too many things via email, but other than like setting up a meeting, setting up a call, like when are y'all going to converse and how you're going to converse shouldn't be via email, especially initially. And those conversations don't have to be happening via email anyway. Um, so if you're worried about that, then use email as a way to schedule, but then use another app or another avenue to actually discuss details with them about whatever it is that you want to discuss with them. And that would be my suggestion there. So like not have detailed conversations via email. And yeah, there is the possibility that they could use that email as a way to identify folks, but it's like, what are you going to do? Right? At least they don't know what you talked about exactly. Like there's no way to fully I guess keep your information in a digital age. Like there's no way to fully do it. There's just ways to make them work harder to get to you and get the information that they want to know out of you. That's really based on anything I know or trained or watched or been exposed to. Is there anything else you want to add, Caitlin, before we get out of here?
Nope, just thank you for everyone who attended. It was such a pleasure to chat with y'all today.
Yeah. Appreciate everyone for attending. Sorry for not hitting record to those who are here and who are not here, but we'll definitely get the slide deck posted for y'all. So I'm going to go ahead and close out now. Thanks for attending, and stay tuned for, go to our website, sign up on our email list so that you know when we have trainings, workshops, or events that are coming up that you can participate in. All right. Have a good rest of your morning, which is a few more minutes, or a good rest of your afternoon for everyone else. All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye.